Hey there, and welcome to day 6 of the What If project. Because what if every manager everywhere did just one small little thing every single day to be not just better, but different, to operate differently, to operate like a true leader? That's what we're doing here. It is, again, day 6 of 30 days where I'm hopping on Facebook Live to share one small, tiny little tip that over the course of 30 days, or over the course of implementing these baby steps, can snowball into something really incredible. And if you have not yet registered for the What If Project, it's really easy to sign up. And it's not too late to sign up, even though we're in day 6. When you sign up, you will get access to the full video library, which has everything included for the entire month, including days 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and a bunch of other stuff in the video library. And you can do that by signing up at yourbestmanager.com/whatif. And before I get into today's tip, I do want to give another reminder, or again, if you're watching this video for the first time, it's not a reminder, it's an announcement, but I'm hosting a live webinar for free tomorrow. It's going to be a 30-minute webinar, so a little bit short in terms of the content. But again, it'll probably go about maybe an extra 15 minutes when you add in Q&A and everything. But the actual message itself will be about 30 minutes. And that webinar is free. You can register at yourbestmanager.com/webinar. It's all about employee performance management. And over that 30-minute span, you will learn the 3 reasons why employees underperform. And then maybe more importantly, what to do once you know what those reasons are, how to diagnose them, and then how to combat them, or how to address them, I should say. Now might be a better word. And if you watched yesterday, I just want to point out something real quick. So yesterday I had that awful gray shower curtain background behind me. And if you've seen the little mini promo video I have floating around on Facebook, or where else is it? I think I put it on LinkedIn too. If you've seen that, that actually looks a lot better. And so actually my wife, Christina, ironed out the wrinkles, and we set up some studio lights and everything, and it actually looks pretty good. And so now I don't have to worry about all the stuff I was complaining about last episode, and I can re-record that entire hiring course, which, by the way, if you want that hiring course, it's not launched yet, which means it's still free. Just go to yourbestmanager.com/hiring. But you definitely want to come to the webinar tomorrow, because if you've been following me over the past 6 days, you know that at the same time I'm doing the What If project, I'm also building out and recruiting founding members to join me in a different leadership development program. And that leadership development program has been going up by $10 every single day. So being day 6, it is $60 today. On June 7th, which is tomorrow, it will be $70. But I can guarantee that one person who attends tomorrow's webinar, and so if you sign up, you'll be entered, is going to win free access to that. And ultimately, it's going to be a $997 course. But if you show up to the webinar, you could get free access. I'll be announcing the winner at the end of that webinar, which would be kind of cool. And then there may also be a discount tomorrow. So if you're thinking of buying or joining as a founding member for $60, maybe wait till the webinar tomorrow. I've got a feeling it'll probably be cheaper than what it is maybe even today. So lots of good stuff there. And again, to register for that, it's yourbestmanager.com/webinar. And with all that said, I've been way too long. I'm already 4 minutes in, haven't even shared the What If tip of the day. We're actually going to be going back all the way to I want to see if I'm missing anything else. I'm not missing anything else. Going all the way back to, I think it was episode 4 of the Your Best Manager podcast. I had leadership expert Kevin Eikenberry on the show. He's the author of a book called Bud to Boss, which is about those transitions between being a contributor and becoming a manager. And he talks in that interview, and as well as his book, and corresponding website and courses, a whole bunch of good stuff there about the different transitions from things like transitioning relationships, because maybe you had a relationship with a colleague that's now changed. There's a transition there. Or maybe you had to have certain communication skills, which is what we're going to be talking about today, and how you communicate as a contributor and how you communicate as a manager is very different. So Kevin's got a lot of great stuff. I think it's just kevineikenberry.com. I'll put a link to that the podcast episode though in the comments, or maybe I'll throw it into the description once I finish here. But when I was talking to him, first of all, this is a side note, what if, but like, what if everyone just took risks? when I started the podcast, I took a risk, and I've been going back through some of the first interviews, and I'm not very good at it, at least in comparison to how I am now. I always thought that being in the recruiting business, I did a lot of interviews, so I thought podcast interviewing, I'd be okay at it, and I'm okay at it. But I'm realizing just the transformation between like episode 1 and episode 86, which goes tomorrow with Jenny Blake. If you don't know who Jenny Blake is, you definitely want to check that out tomorrow. She's a former Google employee. She's the author of a book called Pivot. Anyway, I'm rambling here. But anyway, in episode 4, I interviewed Kevin Eikenberry. Not my greatest interview. He's fine, but I'm not the greatest interviewer in that. But still, he brings a lot of really good discussion. One of the things that he talked about was communication. I mean, this doesn't really matter if you're a manager or not. The ability to communicate in the workplace is going to be important. And so he talked about this thing called benign intent. And when I heard him say benign intent, I was like, hey, what do you mean? Because he actually started off by saying that we should embrace differences in style and approach rather than be frustrated by them. And it actually took me listening back to the episode to actually understand what he meant, but it actually made a lot of sense. So we all know that it's very tempting sometimes to make assumptions. And as leaders especially, I think it's very dangerous because our assumptions, which may be based on perceptions, whether they're real perceptions or false perceptions, but those assumptions and perceptions impact the decisions that we make. And when it comes to communication, you have to remember, is two-way. We often think about it in terms of, am I communicating that way properly? But in order to be a good communicator, you also need to be able to receive messages properly. And that's actually what he was talking about. Because he was talking about how people look at the world differently. People, and the example he gave is one person's direct is another person's blunt. Very, very close, those two words, if you actually look to define them. But they're almost communicated the same way, but the way that the intent behind the communicator could be different, even though they'll be delivering the same message in the same tone, which means that if you have two people that deliver the same message in the same tone, they could mean totally different things. And if this is confusing you a little bit, that's okay, because it confused me a little bit, but it'll make sense in a second. The whole thing is, have you ever been maybe in a meeting, let's say, that might be a good example, and somebody starts communicating something? Maybe they're talking with you, maybe they're in a discussion with you, maybe they're talking about you, and you just feel that there's negative or malicious intent, like that person's out to get me, or I don't like how that person is saying those things, or that person doesn't make me feel like I'm being heard. And as a manager, this can be the same as well. In a team meeting, you may communicate something, and the way that you get a response back could actually maybe rub you the wrong way. Well, what you're doing is you are assuming intent of the messenger and assuming intent of the message. You're assuming, based on maybe it's past experience, maybe it's not, but you're assuming that there's some sort of agenda behind what the person is saying. And as we all know, assumptions are very dangerous. And so I've got two suggestions today. The first one is the advice Kevin Eikenberry suggested on my show. He said, assume benign intent. And the word benign, I mean, most of the time when I think of benign, I think of a tumor being benign. But if you actually look at the definition, it means like gentle or full of grace. And it's like, if you're going to make an assumption, why not? And this is like, what if all managers everywhere, when they made the assumptions on the positive side versus the negative side? Like, just imagine that one little shift. If you just always assumed that when people were communicating, that they were communicating with gentle intent, despite how it may come across, think about how much better you'd be able to communicate with your team in terms of receiving those messages, and think how many fewer conflicts would arise. So that's the first piece of advice. The second piece of advice would be to just like ask. I'm guilty of this, where I've had a meeting with my employees and I look at maybe their faces and their nonverbal cues or something that they comment or say, and I make assumption that I don't address them. And what happens? The team walks out and I have assumed that maybe performance is going to drop, or I've assumed that maybe they're not bought in. Why not ask? And so the two suggestions are, first of all, if you can avoid it, don't make assumptions. But if you're going to make assumptions, assume benign intent. And there's a good reason behind that. I hate to break it to you, but the world doesn't revolve around you. However, everybody operates as if the world revolves around them, which means most of the time we're thinking about ourselves, which is the same for that employee or that colleague. When they're communicating, they're not necessarily, hopefully in most circumstances, unless you do have a malicious employee, they're not thinking about you. They're thinking about propping themselves up so that they can look good. And whether that's selfish or not, we're not going to get into that, but they're more concerned about them than they are you. And so automatically that you can assume that there's a gentleness behind that message because they're not actually out to get you. So hopefully that one makes sense. But the other one would just be ask, hey, I'm reading this right now and you kind of look like you're not bought into what I'm saying. Or, hey, can I tell you how that made me feel, what you just said? Or, hey, is this what you meant? Like, think about the power of just asking a couple questions. And as a leader, again, as I mentioned, it's your responsibility to communicate effectively. And if you are making assumptions, if you are taking your perceptions and saying, well, perception is reality, there's a danger in that because a false perception is only a reality if you let it be a reality, or if it's a consistent reality. And if you are consistently getting the same perception and you are consistently addressing it, you've got an issue on your team you need to address. Maybe a performance issue, but maybe an attitude issue. And that's a whole different ball game. So what if managers everywhere just didn't make assumptions, but asked an extra question, clarified things, and at a minimum, assumed that when people were talking to them, when people were receiving their message, when people were non-verbally communicating, they were communicating with benign intent. What a massive change that would be. Again, you can register for the What If Project, where, again, each day I am sharing one little tip, one small change that if you made it could have a ripple effect in how you lead your team and operate differently. So you can sign up for the What If Project, access days 1 through 5, as well as get notified and get emails of all the different videos in case you miss one while I am live. You can do that at yourbestmanager.com/whatif. And to register for the webinar, which I'm going to say you should do right now, you're watching this, it's not that hard. Just go to yourbestmanager.com/webinar. If you have a team of aspiring managers, or if you have a team of managers, ask them to come on as well, because again, there's going to be a good opportunity for you. And one person is going to win free access to my different leadership development program, which I'm super excited about. And if you have any questions about that, you can bring those as well. The content of the webinar is not about the different program. I will say that the content is employee performance management. That's what the 30 minutes is going to be. But if you have any other questions, you can ask them in the Q&A section, and that'll go beyond the 30 minutes so that you can keep an eye on your time. Hopefully that all makes sense. Let me just check my notes, make sure I didn't screw anything up. I think we're good. So again, have a fantastic evening. It is, I recognize for some of you, it's 10:15 p.m. and I won't even get this emailed out until 10:30-ish, so it's late. So I think I've decided that for I'm going to change up the times a little bit and do it a little bit earlier in the day. I may even do some during the workday and see if that's helpful. But other than that, if you are registered for the What If Project, you will also get the email. So it doesn't matter if you miss anything, because you can always hop into the video library and check those out. That's it. Have a great night, and I will see you tomorrow.